war-torn Baghdad, the hunting grounds. The heat in Baghdad never truly relented. It pressed down like a vice, a constant, oppressive force that made the dust cling to sweat-streaked skin, turning every soldier into a walking, armored ghost of sand and grime. The city itself, this ancient, wounded thing, bore the scars of endless wars, some long forgotten, others fresh, as the blood still drying on shattered pavement. From a bird's-eye view, you could see that Baghdad was once an amazingly beautiful place. Scattered among the chaos and devastation were remnants of a city that had known greatness, ancient sites, grand stadiums, modern buildings, and highways, weaving together a past and present constantly at war with itself. The Olympic Village, once a symbol of international prestige, still sat in the shape of the Olympic rings, a silent monument to a time when Iraq dared to dream of more than war. But beauty had its rivals. Beneath the city's Dallas-like spaghetti of interstate and highway junctions, where green space might have once flourished, lay the Trash Village, a makeshift city formed from the detritus of war and survival, built from the bones of a never-ceasing dump fire. Smoke curled endlessly into the air, the acrid stench of burning waste mixing with the ever-present dust and diesel fumes. It sprawled like an infection, creeping into every unclaimed space, even spilling from a once majestic marble soccer stadium, a structure that had not only hosted games, but had also been repurposed for executions under the Ba'athist regime. Here, operating outside and around Camp Taji, at a key intersection where the main arteries of conflict and commerce intertwined, we hunted. From here, with fast access to land, air, and water conveyance, we hunted the hunters. I had been asked to volunteer for a specialized improvised explosive device, IED hunting team, under Joint Task Force Troy, which meant, in reality, I had no choice at all. The command team had chosen me, and I couldn't be more excited, and now I was leading my own platoon detached from the comfort of our battalion, isolated even from our own company, which itself had been splintered to run high-value target HVT and quick reaction force QRF details for the brigade. My job was singular, clear, and relentless: find, capture, or eliminate as many of the high-value targets as possible, as quickly as possible. The surge was on, and the clock was ticking. They let me hand-pick my team from my brother wolfhounds. I took most of my own squad, and the rest from our platoon and company, the pride of the battalion and brigade. I could take any soldier I wanted, and they reinforced us with specialized troops, CBRN guys, battalion and brigade mortar teams, as well as our own medics, men who knew their craft but had never worked together before. Now a detachment of a theater-wide EOD element, we were Frankenstein's monster of elite skills and pumped-up egos, forged under the control of JTF Troy, running special operations missions under the umbrella of a shadowy task force. We had USAF WIT teams with us, sensitive site exploitation specialists, whose job was to analyze the aftermath of our work and that of the bomb makers, combing through blast sites and dead men's pockets, hunting for intelligence among the carnage, as well as dismantling and studying what we found that didn't explode. The mission was thrilling. It was prestigious. It was suicide. Every day was the same game with different rules. High-value targets HVTs used improvised explosive devices, IEDs, as bait, laying their traps in broad daylight, waiting for us to respond before opening up on us as we cleared the IED with sniper fire. Others specialized in EFPs, shaped charges designed to punch straight through our armor and turn the inside of a mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicle MRAP into a coffin. The MRAPs had just been introduced to the Iraqi battlefield, touted as indestructible, or at least offering survivability. My team and I, though organically equipped with the lightly armored Striker, initially fell in on old Humvees and a couple of South African armored trucks, vehicles that stood no chance against the contemporary threats of IEDs and EFPs, especially the Striker. We were among the first to receive these new MRAPs, and it didn't take long for us to put that claim of survivability to the test. Mine, at least we proved, could melt to the ground. We lived in a chess match played in real time, where one wrong move meant a funeral procession at Arlington. I was a senior staff sergeant, thrown into a role well above my pay grade, leading a team more qualified than me in some respects, but none of them willing to take my place. Alone and detached, our platoon was our own world within the war. operating in the margins where rules bent and survival depended more on instincts than doctrine. And we should have died 10 times every single day. But somehow, we didn't. We laughed at the absurdity of our own survival, at the irony of facing death so often that it had become a familiar companion. We had, in only a few short weeks, become the salty, crusty grunts we had all secretly wanted to be. The kind of ultimate infantrymen, steely-eyed with the 1,000-yard stare, facing death 100 times a day and winning, only to quietly chuckle it off while laughing hysterically at something far less serious. That absurd, cliché infantryman. Already, on this deployment alone, and for many of us, this was not our first, we had rushed off to bombs, bomb makers, and snipers by truck, by bird, by sea, though not really the river counted in our minds. We were true operators, not by rank or designation, but by sheer experience, like the heroes of Vietnam, the ones who wrote the book on how an insurgency war was really fought. We weren't special forces, but we were special operators, commandos in the truest sense, unconventional warriors in a conventional war, hunting men who were hunting us, trading blows in a fight where survival was measured in inches and seconds. 20-hour shifts bled into 22, stretched by last-minute call-outs that came just as replacements were waking up. A cycle that often played out in what ended up days without any sleep at all. Switching out EOD and WIT teams is a must, but for the grunts. There is no rest for the wicked, as the song goes. We were the ones who stood in the gap, the ones who answered every urgent, frantic radio transmission. The near-death experiences piled up, stacking like poker chips in a game we weren't supposed to win. But the number of high-value targets, HVTs, still on my list was rapidly declining, and we were beginning to make a name for ourselves among the Jaish al-Mahdi, and especially Al-Qaeda in Iraq, AQI, who would specifically target me by name. Kinda cool to be known personally by the militant arm of one of the world's greatest enemies. At the end of our shift, whenever that came, was when for us for a moment the dust finally settled and the city exhaled its last breath of gunpowder. We gathered. Around the fire barrel, Cuban cigars in hand, real ones, black market imports. It's easy to get anything you want in Iraq, especially on the bigger FOBs like Taji. There are more third-country nationals TCNS here than coalition troops, probably by 4 to 1. This was our after-action review, our post-mortem on a day that had tried its best to kill us. We'd recount the close calls, the bullets that should have found us, the bombs that somehow didn't go off. Not to mention all the ones that did that day, and how each of them rocked our soul but didn't pierce our armor. We laughed at the absurdity of our own survival, at the irony of facing death so often that it had become a familiar companion. In the glow of the embers, as smoke curled into the Baghdad night, we each carried the silent understanding that eventually luck runs out. The only question was whose turn it would be next. We had already lost buddies on this deployment, and so soon into it. Buddies who were on other missions in the company and battalion. Brother wolfhounds. We had been tracking a high-value target outside Camp Taji for weeks, following a pattern that had emerged from intelligence reports and captured communications. He wasn't just another combatant. He was a trained sniper, responsible for a series of calculated attacks on those attempting to dismantle improvised explosive devices, IEDs. He knew our procedures, how we moved, how we responded, how we tried to safeguard the roads for both our soldiers and civilians. His primary focus was the brigade's combat engineer route clearance team, the men responsible for keeping the roads passable and safe. He targeted them relentlessly, waiting for the moment when they were most vulnerable, striking with cold precision. His attacks weren't random, they were deliberate. He harassed the engineers constantly, forcing them to work under the constant threat of a well-placed shot, disrupting the lifeline of our operations. He knew the importance of his targets. If the route clearance teams couldn't do their job, convoys would be forced onto more dangerous roads, supply lines would be disrupted, and the entire operational tempo of our brigade would be thrown into chaos. He was more than just a sniper. He was an orchestrator of disruption, using his skill to create uncertainty, fear, and tactical paralysis. And it was working, until we started hunting him. We received a call-out and a secure threat briefing, one specifically meant for me. The intelligence was clear. A sniper was operating in the sector, using a pattern of attacks that suggested he was more than just a skilled marksman. He was the high-value target we had been hunting. Rather than wait for the brigade's route clearance team to make their way toward the suspected IED, slowly, methodically, ensuring traffic was stopped and threats were mitigated, Command opted for rapid exploitation. They wanted a decisive response. No drawn-out clearance procedures, no waiting for a textbook dismantling of the threat. They called us in, knowing that if the sniper was still in the area, we had the best shot at taking him out before he could disappear again. We coordinated with the land-owning unit on the way in, nominally a company from the St. Airborne, holding down a joint security station, JSS. But they weren't much help. They weren't bad soldiers, but they were static, tied down to their position, more focused on keeping their own area secure than actively hunting threats outside the wire. The best they could offer was a handful of Iraqi highway patrol officers, but we knew better than to rely on them. At least one of them, if not several, was likely paid to be in on the deal. This wasn't about checking a box or clearing an area. This was about eliminating a direct and persistent threat to our operations. And if the sniper was still there, waiting for his next shot, we were going to be the ones to put an end to it. We weren't your average EOD team, cautiously approaching an IED with bomb suits and robots. We were an infantry unit with EOD and WIT weapons intelligence team attached, a specialized team designed not just to neutralize threats, but to hunt the ones placing them. The IED wasn't just an obstacle to be cleared. It was the bait. The sniper had used this tactic before, setting up the perfect kill zone, waiting for the engineers to arrive, knowing they had no choice but to expose themselves. But this time, instead of engineers, it was us. Instead of a textbook dismantling operation, we came in ready for a fight. We moved with purpose, controlling the roads, cutting off avenues of escape, and scanning every possible position where he could be lying in wait. We weren't playing defense. We were going straight for the source. If the sniper was watching, he had no idea that this time the hunt had reversed. Dismounting with the EOD tech out of sight of the multi-story market, the only building overlooking the three-way intersection, I moved quickly, keeping low, my boots sinking into the soft dirt of the ditch that ran parallel to the road. This was the kind of ground where every step had to be deliberate, where you never knew what had been buried beneath until it was too late. Behind me, the captain, our EOD lead, crawled through the ditch in his bulky EOD suit, the Gumby suit as we called it. A sight so absurd, I couldn't help but chuckle. He looked like some kind of overgrown space creature, clawing its way through the muck, oversized and awkward, his movements slow and deliberate. "Go ahead, laugh it up," he muttered, his voice muffled by the thick layers of protective gear. "But you'll be right here with me when it's time to play green wire, red wire with this thing." I shook my head, still grinning. "Yeah, but at least I won't look like a mascot for bomb disposal." He snorted, shifting his weight forward inch by inch. The suit was designed to absorb a blast, but that was cold comfort when working inches from a live explosive. Still, he moved with confidence. Just another day at the office. But we both knew the IED wasn't the real threat. The market building loomed ahead, its upper floors offering the perfect vantage point. Somewhere inside, a trained eye was watching, a finger resting lightly on a trigger. The sniper was out there, patient and waiting, and we were the ones maneuvering straight into his sights. Once we were close enough to see the IED, it was immediately clear it was a setup. The device was too clean, too obvious. Glued to the tarmac like a stage prop. No attempt had been made to bury it, no effort to conceal the wires. It wasn't meant to be hidden. It was meant to draw us in. I keyed my radio, voice low but firm. "Position the trucks. Shield the site as best you can." Within moments, the convoy adjusted, the armored vehicles rolling into position around the bomb, creating a protective barrier for the EOD tech to move forward. It wasn't perfect. There was no such thing as perfect in a fight like this, but at least it would limit the sniper's angle, forcing him to adjust if he wanted a clean shot. The problem was, from where we were positioned, the best we could do was make his shot slightly more difficult. A sniper of his caliber wouldn't be deterred by a minor inconvenience. He would wait, find the gap, and take the shot when the moment was right. And that moment was coming. I scanned the market building ahead, my eyes moving window to window, rooftop to shadow, searching for anything, a reflection, movement, a silhouette, out of place. He was there. He had to be. The game had begun. and we were either going to flush him out or he was going to take another life. The captain turned his head slightly in my direction, his voice low but pointed. "All right, what's your plan?" I didn't answer right away. All radio chatter had gone silent. I wore an earpiece tuned to multiple nets, brigade, sheriff's net or spec ops, landowners, EOD, and my team's frequency. At any given moment, there was usually some form of comms traffic, status updates, crosstalk, someone cracking a joke in a moment of tension. But now, nothing. Every frequency I monitored had gone dead, as if the entire battlefield had taken a collective breath and was now waiting for my assessment. Outwardly, everything looked normal. The market was still bustling, civilians going about their day, merchants hawking their goods in the shaded stalls across the parking lot. No one was running, no one was ducking. No one seemed aware that a live explosive sat in the middle of the road just a few meters from where they shopped. To them, we were just another routine patrol. I had gunners in the trucks, barrels ready to snap toward any threat. I had men in the ditch and on the ground who would jump out and lay down scunny, suppressive fire, without hesitation if I gave the word. But none of that mattered if we didn't have a target. The sniper was watching, waiting. We had to find him first. I exhaled slowly, my eyes scanning the upper floors of the market, searching for the smallest tell. A glint, a shadow shifting unnaturally, a slight movement behind a curtain. Then, without turning my head, I murmured just loud enough for the captain to hear. "I think I already know where he is." I know where I would be," I murmured, eyes locked on the upper floors of the market. "But I can't see him without exposing my position to him." The captain turned his head toward me, his expression unreadable beneath the thick visor of his Gumby suit. His built-in mic and speaker distorted his voice into something mechanical, void of amusement. "So, you're going to crawl forward," he said flatly, "and I'm going to wait and see if you're right. And if you are," he let the thought hang. "If I am," I replied, "I just have to be faster. But actually you're wearing the ballistic suit, so you're going forward first. There's a bomb, remember?" He chuckled, the sound crackling through his mic. And then, without another word, he began to move. I tracked his movement in my periphery as he inched forward, slow and deliberate, his left hand reaching out first, his bulky helmet cresting just above the lip of the ditch. At the exact same moment, I moved too, just enough, rising ever so slightly, rifle already trained on the position I had suspected. A fraction of a second, crack. The sharp, unmistakable report of a Russian-made Dragunov rifle cut through the thick heat, a heartbeat after the dust in front of me kicks up. I fired at the same time, my shot snapping through the air, my rifle's controlled concussion doing nothing to mask the enemy's. But there was only one difference. My round found its mark first. Through my scope, I watched him drop. A clean hit. But I didn't wait to admire the shot. Instinct took over. I dropped instantly back into the ditch, pressing myself low into the dirt. It was far too common for snipers to use each other as bait, to expose one shooter just long enough to draw out a second target. And if that was the case here, then I was the bait now. I steadied my breathing, keeping my rifle close, scanning the angles in my mind. If there was a second sniper, where would he be? Would he be watching the same market, holding the same lanes? Or would he be farther out, waiting for me to make the mistake of assuming it was over? The captain, still crawling, didn't break stride. If he had any second thoughts, he didn't show it. "Clear?" he asked, his voice crackling through his Gumby suit mic. I kept my head low, eyes sharp, sweeping the rooftops, the shadowed windows, the places where death could wait unseen. Then, after a moment, I exhaled. "Clear, I got you." And that next morning, before my first call-out, I sat in the morning threat briefing, sipping my Army-issued energy drink of choice, sugar-free Citrus X. The can was still ice-cold, condensation pooling against my fingers, a small mercy in a world of heat and exhaustion. In my other hand, I poked at the cold, wet garbage someone had so thoughtfully brought back from the DFAC for me. The kind of meal that was equal parts pity and inside joke, because they knew how much I hated MREs. A soggy mess of eggs and something resembling sausage, congealed together in a styrofoam container. It was fuel, nothing more. The room around me was the usual blend of half-awake faces, brass and intelligence officers shifting in their seats, senior NCOs leaning forward, elbows on the table, eyes locked on the flickering projector screens. Satellite imagery, heat maps, fresh reports. The stale air carried the weight of men who had barely slept. The low murmur of voices trading updates on overnight movements, intercepted communications, and the ever-evolving chessboard of the war. Then, my name came up. At first, I didn't fully process it, half distracted by the lukewarm bite of powdered eggs on my tongue, until they threw a grainy, washed-out photo onto the screen. A shot of me. I froze mid-chew. For a second, I thought they were messing with me, that this was some dark humor, a joke at my expense, and I was just too tired to catch it. Maybe I had missed the setup. Maybe the punchline was still coming. I glanced around the room, waiting for someone to crack a grin, to nudge me, to say gotcha. But no one did. The briefing just kept rolling, smooth and steady, as if my face up on the screen was just another line item on the agenda, as if this wasn't new information, just another thread in the fabric of the war. The intel officer didn't pause, didn't look at me, didn't break stride as he laid it out in that same calm, clinical voice. Confirmed chatter indicates there's a bounty out. Significant payout for anyone who can provide a kill, a capture, or even just intelligence leading to an opportunity. The words rang in my ears. I forced myself to swallow, the taste of cold eggs and stale bread turning into something heavier in my gut. My name, my face, my unit insignia. They had been watching us as much as we had been watching them. The kill yesterday, my shot, my decision, hadn't just eliminated a threat. It had escalated the game. I'd gone from hunter to hunted. Kick-ass, a worthy adversary. Somewhere out there, on the other side of this war, someone had put my name on a list. Someone had decided I was important enough, dangerous enough, to warrant a price on my head. I wasn't just another soldier anymore. I was the soldier they wanted gone. I should have felt something. Fear, maybe. Dread, a sense of impending doom. Instead, I felt a slow, familiar burn. Not anger, not even adrenaline, just recognition. This was the game. The eternal duel between men who lived by the rifle. A dance as old as war itself. I had taken one of theirs. Now they wanted to take me. Good. That meant I had their attention. That meant I was making an impact. Across the table, the captain still hadn't said a word. He just gave me that same nod. Not approval, not warning, just acknowledgement. Here we are. And so we were. I exhaled, slow and steady, took another sip of my drink, and let the artificial citrus bite wash away whatever was left of my appetite. The briefing continued. Business as usual. The setup. We had been called out to a suspected weapons cache. Nothing unusual. Another day of searching, clearing, and combing through the skeletons of war. The town was small, one of those nameless blips on the map that meant something to someone but nothing to us. It had the usual blend of bullet-ridden cinder block homes, dusty alleyways, and the ever-present feeling that we weren't welcome. Just my patrol team. No battalion backup, no overwatch, just us moving door to door, relying on the same instincts that had kept us alive this long. By the time we rolled back onto base, tired and coated in the fine dust of the place, we were ready to call it. The cache had been a bust, nothing but scrap metal and a few rusted-out AKs that wouldn't fire even if someone begged them to. Then we noticed it. A key piece of equipment was missing. At first, we thought it had been misplaced, some logistical error or the result of exhaustion. But deep down, we knew. Someone had lifted it off one of my squad leaders without him even noticing. A pickpocket job, clean and deliberate. Not some opportunistic swipe, but part of a bigger game. The radio went silent. That told me everything I needed to know. We were being set up. Orders came down fast. Get back out there. Retrieve the equipment. A priority item, they called it. No time to second guess. No time to protest. Just pack up, mount up, and roll back into the town we had just spent all day clearing. A loss of this caliber is significant and triggers all kinds of security protocols, such as an OTAR, which we would be performing on the move on the way back out. So no comms until we complete this process, which the whole brigade does at one time. So no comms and no support. I knew what was waiting for us before we even left the wire. The signs were textbook. A newly paved road, too fresh, too clean. A recently erected fence, hemming us in on both sides like a goddamn cattle chute. The kind of scenario that didn't just happen. It was built, designed. There was no other route. I protested in vain. We knew it was our responsibility to go back, and there was no other way to get there except by truck. Pre-coordinated timing forced us to return at just the right moment. Not on our schedule. Theirs, thanks to their control of the route. At that time, the Iraqi forces we paid being corrupt was a given. By the time we reached the first checkpoint, I was fully expecting to be catastrophically destroyed before we even made it past. But the checkpoint was unmanned. Abandoned, that was the final piece. If there had been even the ghost of a chance that this wasn't an ambush, it was gone now. Still, we had to go forward. And forward we went, conducting a search of the town and performing Hands Across America in the open field. We had sent engineers looking for caches in earlier in the day, like we were trying to get sniped or ambushed. And what fools we must have looked like. But a missing radio of this type is a big deal. A hill actually worth dying on, unfortunately. I was driving. At this point, we were short-handed, having lost soldiers in the battalion and brigade, plus scheduled ramp, and leave rotations pulling more men out of the rotation. I preferred to drive anyway, even as the team's sergeant. It gave me control, gave me something to focus on. If we were going to roll into a trap, I'd rather be the one behind the wheel. About a mile outside of town, along the cattle chute road, we passed what was now a manned checkpoint. Interesting. Then another mile down the road. We crawled forward, moving slow, as ordered, all lights on, beams scanning the sides of the road for the missing radio, because someone, somewhere, thought it might have just fallen out of an armored truck. Dumb shit. Even as slowly as we moved, I saw it first. My truck, the C vehicle, second in the convoy. A pothole with a black box appeared in my FLIR driving screen. I slammed the brakes and swerved hard toward the passenger side, away from the IED. Just before everything went black, I saw it. The trigger stick of the anti-tank mine. I saw it. Too late. The black box, the pothole, the trigger stick. My mind processed it faster than my body ever could. A sickening inevitability. A cosmic certainty. Then, nothing. No light. No darkness. No sound. No self. Just a vast, perfect absence. I'd been somewhere, and then, not. Scattered. Dissolved. Unmade. Had I died? No. Something deeper. Not an ending, but a severing. A displacement. As if every molecule of me, every atom, every thought, had been momentarily shaken loose from the binding threads of my existence. My body was somewhere, but I was not in it. And in that space, in that limbo, I knew that I had been here before. Not in this life, not in this war, but before. Where? When? Had I always known? Had I always returned? I was not alone. Not exactly. There was something, someone, not a voice, not a presence, but an awareness that bled through the edges of whatever this was. Life. I stood in Sparta, my shield polished to a golden sheen, reflecting the firelight of our courtyard. My wife's eyes locked onto mine, unwavering. Her voice firm as she placed my helm upon my head. "Come back with your shield, or on it," she said. No tears, no wavering. A Spartan wife's final gift. The phalanx formed, shields interlocking, spears angled forward. The march began. Death. The battle at Plataea raged in a storm of iron and blood. The air was thick with the cries of the dying, the clang of bronze, the relentless press of Persian bodies. My spear found its mark again and again, until I felt the searing bite of steel. A Persian spear, driven deep into my ribs, the force of it knocking me to the ground. The sky blurred. I heard my brothers roaring, fighting on. The world faded. Afterlife. I awoke in the golden fields of Elysium. A cool breeze brushed my skin, the scent of olives and warm earth filling my senses. My brothers stood before me, laughing, embracing, their scars gone, their spirits light. "You died well," one said, gripping my shoulder. "An honorable death, a Spartan death." And then I heard her voice, a whisper against my ear. "You did not fail." The light swallowed me whole. Life, the weight of 100 battles settled upon my shoulders, victories etched into the land as scars upon the earth. A golden map sprawled before me, the edges curling, the ink smudging beneath my fingertips, as though even the world itself resisted my grasp. The air in the chamber was thick with the scent of oil lamps and parchment, the murmurs of my generals swirling in the distance, their voices hollow, their ambitions no longer my own. There was nothing left to conquer, yet the hunger within had not been sated. Triumph had soured into regret, the echoes of a boy's dream fading into the silence of an empty throne. Death, the fever took hold, a slow, insidious burn licking at the edges of my consciousness. The walls of the great city blurred, the marble pillars warping in the heat of my sickness. My limbs felt leaden, my breath ragged. Faces appeared, shifting like specters. Men who had followed me across deserts, through rivers of blood, now waiting for a command I could no longer give. My fingers twitched toward the map. The world I had carved from the bones of kings, now nothing more than ink and dust. What have I done? The words rasped from my throat, but there was no answer. Only silence, only darkness, afterlife. A vast throne room stretched before me, its golden columns reaching endlessly into the void. The torches burned without warmth, casting shadows that had no masters. No courtiers, no warriors, no voices lifted in praise or defiance. The weight of the crown sat upon my brow, heavier now than any armor I had ever worn. I turned, searching, but there was no one left to kneel, no kingdom left to rule. Only emptiness, only the echo of my own footsteps. Then a voice, distant yet near, neither condemning nor comforting. Your journey is not over. Rebirth, a light, blinding and infinite, split the darkness. It did not beckon, it commanded. My body, once broken, was weightless. The throne, the empire, the conquests, all faded into the nothingness from which they came. There was no triumph, no regret, only the undeniable pull of something beyond. Without hesitation, I stepped forward. The light consumed me, and I was born anew. Life, the weight of Rome, rested upon broad shoulders, heavier than any armor ever worn. The Senate chamber swirled with whispers, coiling through the air like unseen daggers, each voice another thread in a web of betrayal. A city, an empire, shaped by conquest, now lay beneath a single name, a name that both unified and divided. Maps sprawled across a marble table, ink bleeding into the borders of conquered lands. Victory, once sweet, now tasted of dust. The Republic was a fragile illusion, and the hands that once offered loyalty now clenched beneath their robes. Death, a meeting of men turned into a spectacle of treachery. One blade, then another, each strike familiar, each face a reminder of trust misplaced. A sharp gasp, a staggered step, the world narrowing to nothing but the cold embrace of marble, and the crimson spreading across it. A voice, pleading, disbelieving, not of a ruler, but of a man who had thought himself among brothers. The pain was fleeting, the silence that followed was eternal. Afterlife. The forum stood empty. Statues of gods and men alike towered above, their unseeing eyes gazing upon a city stripped of its heart. A throne stood within reach, but there was no senate to oppose, no legions to command, no crowd to cheer. Power had been absolute, and now it was nothing. Then a voice, distant yet unwavering. Your journey is not over. Rebirth. The Ides had passed, but the road stretched onward, a horizon bathed in golden light. A step forward, and the past fell away. The light rose before me, and I entered a new life. The salt spray crashed against the longship as the prow carved through the waves. The scent of pine-tarred wood and brine filled the air, mingling with the anticipation of battle. The shore loomed ahead, Saxon warriors forming ranks beyond the dunes, their steel gleaming in the morning sun. The weight of the axe in my hand was familiar, comforting. The gods called for blood, and I would answer. Death, a clash of iron and bone, war cries swallowed by the din of slaughter. Blades sang, shields splintered, men fell. A sharp pain, a sword finding the gaps in my armor, biting deep between my ribs. The world tilted, the sky darkened, and I fell onto my shield, my breath rattling in my throat as the battle raged beyond me. Afterlife. The halls of Valhalla roared with laughter, the firelight casting flickering shadows upon the feast laid before me. Mead flowed freely, the scent of roasted meat thick in the air. A hand, cool against my forehead, a Valkyrie, her eyes knowing, her voice a whisper. Not your last journey, warrior, rebirth. The flames rose high, devouring flesh and bone, carrying the soul forward. The fire embraced me, and I stepped beyond. Life. The bitter wind tore through Valley Forge, biting into wool and flesh alike. The scent of campfires and desperation filled the air. Men stood in ragged lines, their eyes hollow, their bodies failing them as surely as the war had tested them. Boots in tatters, bellies empty. Yet their resolve did not waver. Every step through the frozen ground felt like carrying the weight of the newborn republic on my shoulders. The revolution lived and died in these moments, in the eyes of these men who pleaded for hope without speaking a word. Death. Years later, the sound of the Potomac lapped gently at the shores of Mount Vernon. The war had ended. The republic stood, yet the battle within my own body could not be won. Breath shallow, limbs frail, I lay upon the bed where my final battle would be fought, not against an army, but against time itself. Afterlife. The fields stretched endlessly, rolling green hills bathed in the morning sun. The republic, eternal, unbroken. The faces of those I had marched beside greeted me, men who had bled for freedom, who had stood when standing seemed impossible. Their hands clasped my shoulders, their voices lifted in welcome. Rebirth. The vision shimmered, dissolving into light. The war was never truly over. The great eastern wheel, the afterlives merge, souls, like rivers, flow into a great ocean. The echoes of laughter from the halls of Valhalla, the whisper of Elysium's golden fields, the silent reverence of Rome's empty forum, and the rolling hills of the Republic eternal, all dissolve into one. A voice, the same voice that has always been there, resonates through the void. All lives are one. All journeys are learning. You are not alone. The great wheel of reincarnation turns. Each life dissolves into the next, effortlessly, seamlessly. Time does not move forward nor backward, but spirals. Each revolution another step toward understanding. And then, the present life sharpens, coming into focus. The echoes fade. The journey begins anew. The heat of fire, the taste of smoke. Awareness crashes in. My hands snap to my mic toggle, instinct taking over. But reality comes fast, flames licking at my face, the dash and interior consumed in fire. I look back. My guys in the rear are desperately trying to drop the ramp, but the heat has warped the frame. The lieutenant, who had joined us as an extra body, is kicking at his door, panic clear in his movements. My hands fly to the fire suppression system. Nothing. Flip the switch. Nothing. Try again. Still nothing. The LT kicks his door open, and I shove him out, my team following. For a brief moment, I am alone, stuck, my body armor caught on my seatbelt. Foolishly, I had just bought a new toy, a seatbelt cutter from the PX at Taji. Money was tight, but now it was the best purchase I had ever made. I was free. Leaping from the burning wreck, I land in a lake of fire, burning fuel, and aimee. There, in the flames, the master control panel of my fire suppression system lies ruined, its little fireman and axe emblem staring back at me. Pain floods in. My radio mic is plucked from my hand, my words lost to the chaos. Talking into the mic and being wrestled from my hand, I try to rally my team, reposition, call for support. But I am lifted, carried to the armored jerv. The crusty old master sergeant grabs me by the face as I try and fight him over and over, absorbing my senseless blows to his helmet and body armor, stopping. Me short of reaching for my knife and unable to use my rifle for the way they have bear hugged me. And he and my boys carry me, still fighting, to the jerv. He says, "Calm down, Mac, it's us. You got knocked the fuck out," laughing. "We got a ground medevac coming, but I can get you and your crew back to Taji faster, and I'm not turning you over to anyone else until I got you safely back home." I mutter some nonsense about security, not realizing the situation is well at hand, with QRF and the landowning unit now in hot pursuit of what should have been a full-blown complex ambush meant to pull us out of the vehicle and take us hostage. Fatefully, Our doors had been sealed by the force of the blast and combat locked. One more time, I try to rally my team, reposition, call for support, but I am this time lifted into the armored jerv. Swinging and attempting to free myself, I struggle against whomever is accosting me. I know them, but I cannot tell from when or where. My mind isn't working right. My vision blurs. This isn't my first IED. I know this feeling. Let me shake it off a minute and I'll be all right. But this time, they are trying to stop me. Confusion. Puke. I fall again and again, vomiting over and over. Blood from my ears and nose. I am furious. The inferno of the truck rages behind me, its armor melting as our ammunition and ordnance detonates within. The chaos unfolds like a surreal nightmare, my perspective shifting. I seem to see it all through a set of night vision goggles. Yet mine are broken, hanging by the tie-down from my helmet. In all the fights I have ever been in, all the sports injuries, all the combatives tournaments, no one has ever made my own blood bleed from my nose. I try to rally my team, reposition, call for support, but I am locked into the armored jerv. My crew dazed, but with me, I check my crew. No blood, no obvious injuries, but my own voice betrays me. My words make no sense. My radio, shattered. 3 days in the dark. I lay in my room. No light, no sound, no world, just darkness. A void of my own making. No calls home, no Xbox, no gym, no food. Not really. Just the slow, nauseating tilt of the world, the sickening lurch of my own breath in my chest. I had to fight to stay here. The docs wanted me gone, Landstuhl, they said. Germany, a rearward place, soft beds and sterile lights, a world apart from the desert. But I wasn't leaving. Not while my boys were still out there. Not while the war was still turning, chewing, demanding. Not while I had a choice. I couldn't look at the light. I couldn't stand the sound. And here, at this goddamn airfield, there was nothing but sound. Engines screaming. Rotors slicing air. Jets punching through the sky. The constant, crushing, concussive weight of movement, of war still spinning outside this thin metal door. And every vibration of it, every hum, every goddamn footstep outside, knives in my skull. I was dizzy. I was puking. I was trying not to exist. And I had 3 days. 3 days to pull myself together. 3 days to stop the room from tilting. 3 days to stand, to steady, to convince them I could still fight. 3 days. But I was alive. A whisper in my mind. You are alive. You chose this. You chose to come back and help others. Feed my lambs. Purple, haze amp, forgotten memories. Years later, the ice in my whiskey clinks as I swirl the glass in my hand. The garage door is open, and we are facing out. A warm Oklahoma summer night stretches out before me. A vast open sky, cicadas humming, the occasional deep growl of a truck rolling by. I cannot resist being outside on these nights. I take a slow drag from my homegrown Skywalker AUG blunt, the cherry flaring bright against the darkness, exhaling thick clouds of smoke that drift in lazy spirals toward the rafters of my garage. The scent mixes with the faint bitterness of burning sage. The clouds are thick, even with the door open. An audiobook plays in the background. Lady and Carson sleep at my feet, their bodies warm, their breathing steady but restless. Their paws twitch. Maybe they're hunting. Maybe they see what I just saw. Because I saw something. Or maybe I didn't. For a moment, I let the purple haze settle over me, thick and heavy, pulling me deeper into the warmth of my high. The book playing through my speaker drones on. Some gravel-voiced narrator spinning a story of old battles and long-dead kings, or mystics, Gnostics, psychedelics, shamanism, Hindu belief structures and scriptures, historical fiction, and forbidden texts. All bleed in, all a possibility. I don't really hear it, I have. Been a million miles and thousands of years away. The words bleed into my mind, twisting, merging with the visions I just walked through. I close my eyes. I was a Spartan once. I felt the weight of my shield, the rush of battle, the sting of the final blow. I knew a glorious death. I was Alexander. I stood in Babylon, holding the world in my hands, only to watch it slip through my fingers. I was a Roman, a Viking, a general, a warrior, a man who lived and died 100 times over. And then I was here, in this body, in this garage, whiskey in one hand, a blunt in the other. Was I even a soldier in Iraq? What's true? Who am I? What life is this? Knowing for certain that at least one part is true. I choose to live the life of a bodhisattva, in whatever weird modern context my God has planned for me. I chose to come back, a man who believes in divine determinism, sure of at least one choice. Or perhaps, as Tiffany says, we are only allowed the choices he is certain of the outcome.